Luke Taylor. I know you're in a lot of pain, Luke.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and you'll have to forgive me for my dancing around to aid my pain back. Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Full quote from 1887 by British historian Lord Acton, and it explained how power in its most essential form inevitably corrupts. And I think we discuss here today how that absolute power, that feeling of invincibility, has led to the behaviour that we are also utterly disgusted about around the chamber. I speak on behalf of all residents who've been in touch with me over the last few weeks, whether you are a Republican, a monarchist, ambivalent to the general principle. What we see is a scandal that is not just engulfing Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, but also dragging in the integrity of the wider royal family, because, as has been raised by the Honourable Member for Brighton Pavilion so correctly, we have to ask who knew what and when. What was known about the £12 million that was paid out to Virginia Guthrie in 2022? And how was that allowed to be used to settle a civil suit of allegations of Andrew's offences? Alleged offences, I should say. How was that allowed to happen in the first place? As my right honourable friend, the member for Kingston and Surbiton, has already said, we've seen one friend of Epstein lobbying for a job for another friend of Epstein, and then a 12-year relationship that benefited them both financially and has now resulted in the two arrests for misconduct in public office. This humble address talks about how that began, and I think it is absolutely the right place to start. As a politician coming here, trying to convince the public that we are there to serve, we are there to represent them, that the conspiracies they read in the darker reaches of the internet are nonsense, and that there isn't an elite paedophile ring that runs the world's institutions, becomes increasingly difficult to maintain when actually we see these links in the files that go directly from the Kremlin to the White House and everywhere in between, including the British royal family. We talk about standards in public life, we talk about integrity. It's very difficult to maintain if not only that is known and the information in those files is understood by the public, but that then we're unable to scrutinise, we're unable to bring people to this place to ask questions about what has happened. So as discussed, this humble address covers quite a narrow set of papers that surround the appointment as the Special Envoy to the UK trade and industry. However, I think we've all discussed as well the parliamentary gymnastics that has been required to get a discussion of outrageous misdeeds allegedly conducted by that man to be discussed in this chamber. And it's those parliamentary gymnastics that I think we have to call out as being so outrageously an outrageous impediment to what our jobs are in this very chamber that we need to dispel from this place entirely. We talk about as well the implications of Andrew and his his position in the line of succession. I think at the time that the photos were published of him walking in New York with Jeffrey Epstein in 2011, he was fourth in line to the throne. We talk now of his position, but at the time that that scandal was occurring, how close he was to the throne. It's disgusting. I think I'm going to ask the Minister specifically if he can give us an update on legislation that the government might bring forward to remove Andrew from the line of succession. We speak about, I think he's eighth in the line now, and maybe not such a worry, but the principle of that position to our head of state is obnoxious in the extreme, and I'd like to hear if he's got any update.
give way?
Absolutely.
I think people just find this. We understand we have a living, breathing constitutional democracy that grows as society better understands things. But it just makes no sense, does it? That if the king doesn't want him to be a prince, it makes no sense that we have to still bring legislation in order to strip him of his dukedom and his earldoms, and equally that he remains in the line of succession and could potentially be a king. Now, yes, we've got plenty of other things we need to be getting on with, but there's a certain logic here that just needs tidying up, if nothing else.
I thank my honourable friend for her intervention, and I completely agree. I also want to thank the Minister for his very early acknowledgement of the support for the humble address today, and I also think that he has engaged constructively with comments about its scope, about exactly what it says, and I think that has been done in and broadly around the chamber, very much a supportive attitude. So I do thank him for that. I'm just going to return to the point about the negative privilege, that we cannot speak freely and have had to use this gymnastic approach to get to the point that we're at today. I've submitted a number of UQ requests to the Speaker's office, who has absolutely understandably not managed to get to justify a discussion of the scandal as it has unfolded, but the necessity that we've had to take to phrase it in the sense of an examination of the Prince's arrangements and his use of property and all sorts of confusing attempts to not then discuss it as we've mentioned around the chamber today has precluded us from doing.
I hate to add to this anguish, but there is a convention in the House that we don't refer to urgent question requests that we've put through to the Speaker.
And I will apologise for breaking that, but I think it is a useful demonstration, however rightfully and with such utter wisdom that we will never question, that the Speaker chooses. Again, it's that challenge to raise issues of this type in the chamber. I will move to close, thank you. Specifically now, and I think the Liberal Democrat benches have been pretty clear on this throughout the afternoon, we have to have a full statutory inquiry into the whole Epstein affair and the tentacles that it has inserted into our public life. We must allow those criminal investigations to be completed, but that investigation must be able to compel witnesses and required to give evidence under oath and to produce documents and other evidence. This must be used not only to punish those who have been complicit and have been involved in the heinous crimes that we've heard about and seen about in the media, who again, and I will reflect other colleagues' comments about the incredible work that the media and journalists have done in investigating these crimes and pouring through those files. I really do think that cannot be overstated at the effort that they've taken on that. So just to conclude, we do have to ensure that the events that have transpired over the last 20, 30 years from Epstein's scandal can never be repeated, and that the investigation must allow us to fireproof our constitution from similar events ever happening again.
And how the institutions around him completely and seemingly failed to act.
Just on that point,
We'll give way.
Okay.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. And just on this point about what the protection officers knew, for example, does it not show the outrageous power imbalance between a royal and an employee, and how the fact that you have someone in that situation who then has to, and we're talking about whistleblowing, we're talking about reporting what has been seen. Does it just not show how outrageous that even the prospect of having someone in that situation is, that they are then being held to account for not calling out the behaviour of someone whose position, whose privilege, whose kind of birthright has put them into such a position? Does he agree that this just shows how our constitution and our structure has put us into such an outrageous twist and how difficult it's going to be to unwind that.
I thank my friend for that intervention, and I completely agree with him, and I suspect this is just a small start on something that's much, much wider, and I imagine there's probably much more information on that to come.
Greedy men, mostly men, who have behaved in a way that has sought to enrich them further and increase their power.
Just on that point.
With pleasure.
I hope this adds to her point, because does she find the irony that the only person who has been imprisoned as part of the Epstein scandal is a woman?
He is not the only person to refer to structural sexism in this debate, and I think particularly my colleague and honourable friend, the member for Frome and East Somerset, made an extremely powerful speech about how we could, should we choose to do so as a parliament, embed looking at sexism, at violence against women and girls, in our policy making, in our thinking, in a way that would benefit the whole of society. And I'm grateful for him raising the point that there remain many people for whom the hand of justice is yet to seek them out with the full vigour with which it
is guilty of some offence or some crime or other. That is a matter for the prosecuting authorities, and a person is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Now, I think the honourable gentleman with the bad back wanted to say something.
I thank the Minister. I don't know whether I do thank him or not. Just to push gently back on that, and I'd be interested in his response, does not the fact that we've had 15 years since Andrew resigned in disgrace, and that hasn't come to Parliament, demonstrate that there is a reluctance, there is a, whether if it is indeed a true misunderstanding of process, that just hasn't come before the House to discuss and to really get into the weeds on this? Does he not see that as a demonstration of a need for a change in the process, or at least an acknowledgement that we need to be digging deeper into these sorts of issues?
Well, yes, and I also think probably we need more Paul Flynn's, is the truth of the matter. I've always been a bit sceptical about independent MPs, but I've always been very much in favour of independently minded MPs. And I think that that's one of the backbones of making Parliament really function effectively. I love the whips, of course I love the whips, but now the honourable lady